went to the Dallas Cowboys, accepted a job that I didn't know what it was. They couldn't tell me what it was. There was only one person that knew what the job was, and he was not around. But the interesting thing is how that came about. I met with a league rep who said the Cowboys are going to create a new position. I said, great. And they said, we're basically traveling the country looking for candidates, and you're one of those people that we're talking to. Super. Okay, what's the job? Well, we don't know. Well, what do you mean you don't know? You're looking for people. And they said, we really don't know, but it encompasses someone with your kind of background, with a law enforcement background, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. The next thing was to go to Tex Schramm's house. Tex Schramm was the president and general manager of the Cowboys. I met him on a Sunday afternoon. He met me at the door, sort of reminded me of Rodney Dangerfield in a way. He had a baggy Hawaiian shirt, Bermuda shorts on, and very, very friendly. He said, hey, come on in. How about a drink? And of course, I'm a three-piece suit. And well, no, sir, not right now. He and I sat and we had an absolutely phenomenally delightful conversation. It was really great. It was like talking with you guys. And he kept offering me drinks, never talked about the job, my qualifications, or any of that kind of stuff. It was person to person. After about an hour or so, Coach Tom Landry showed up. Tom Landry showed up looking like a mortal man. My view of Tom Landry was always this impeccably dressed
the fedora
man, fedora on the sideline and everything else. And he came in and sat down.
Welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz. Fitz, how are you?
What's my full name, Ray?
Jim Fitzgerald.
Thank you. I got my identity crisis going on the last week or so.
No worries.
But yes, you may call me Fitz. I've been on with Megan Kelly a lot. I'm BFF with her now, and she calls me Fitz. Fitz is fine. We have a special guest tonight, don't we, Ray?
We do. Today's guest has lived a career that sounds like something straight out of a movie. Larry Wansley spent a decade as an undercover agent with the FBI, infiltrating organized crime and corruption cases. His life was often on the line. After leaving federal law enforcement, he took that investigative mindset into professional sports, becoming the director of corporate security for the Dallas Cowboys and pioneering one of the first player security and counseling programs in the NFL. Later, he went on to lead global security efforts in the aviation industry, helping shape security practices that impacted airlines and passengers around the world. His career has taken him from the dangerous undercover operations to the sidelines of America's team to the front lines of corporate and aviation security. He shares many of those experiences in his book, Tough Streets, Rough Skies, and Sunday Sidelines. Larry, welcome to the show.
Gentlemen, thank you very, very much. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
We like putting out, if people want to buy Tough Streets, Rough Skies, Sunday Sidelines, what's the best way to get it?
Go to my website, LarryWansley.com, or any of the major retail bookstores, Barnes Noble, Books A Million, all of those, Amazon, you name it, it's out there. But I appreciate that.
And folks, you heard a little bit about him in Ray's introduction. This guy has worked with celebrities and football sidelines, some really interesting cases. We like to go back in our Wayback Machine, Larry, and go even into our guest youth in some cases. Tell us how you even got into law enforcement. Compton PD was your first gig, I understand, as law enforcement officer?
It was, and I had no intention. I had no thoughts, desires, or anything for law enforcement. But when you mentioned my childhood, I kind of sum everything up into very, very definitive and significant events in my life that kind of pull me along. And I grew up in the years of segregation, and I had a guidance counselor in high school whom every time I would talk with him, I would say, look, I don't have any money. I've got great grades and so forth, but don't have any money. Can you help me out and get a scholarship? And really a fine gentleman and everything else. I respected him, but he would sincerely look at me and say, Larry, college is not for Negroes. I will help you get a job up at the Rock or the loading dock and marry that little gal of yours and have some babies and have a nice life. And I thought, no, there were a couple of words that came to mind. I won't repeat them here, but I thought, no, a family and kids yes at some point, but this is not it. Consequently, I thought, well, how can I get a college education? And I thought the military. And as soon as I thought of the military, I thought of the Marines. And that was a very, very significant point in my life because the rest of my life has been really founded on those values, principles, and everything else that I learned in the Marine Corps. And that's who I became. Well, I got out early on a college cut. They had a program if you were going to college, and I got out early on that. And I really wanted to be an engineer. I simply wanted to build things. Went to school, and I happened to run into a guy at a bus stop in Compton. I'd been at the beach down in Long Beach in California. Happened to see him, and I stopped, and he and I had been on the same Marine football team in Okinawa. And I stopped and I said, "Hey, look, what are you doing? Let's catch up. Haven't seen you in a while. Let's go knock down a couple of beers." And he said, I'm going to take a test. And I said, "Look, I'll take you. I'll wait on you, and then we'll hang out after that." This is how it got started. I took him down to this civic hall in Compton, and there were a couple of hundred or more applicants there. He didn't even tell me what the job was or what he was interested in. We were too busy talking about times in the Ville and Okinawa and all that kind of thing. So while I was waiting on him, one of the officials said, "Look, you can't hang around out here. You go inside, just take a seat. You don't even have to pay me the buck, but you get out of my hair. You cannot hang out here." I went inside and I did not know at that point what the test was for or anything. I just took a seat to get out of the way. When I opened the test booklet, I saw mugshots looking at me, and I looked and I said, "Wow, okay. Oh, this is for police officer." Okay. Well, I don't want to be a cop. So I sat there for a while. And then finally, I guess the curiosity got to me, and I just took the test. I wound up passing the test. My buddy didn't. And
Figure.
when I really found out what it was all about, the pay and everything else, I thought, this is interesting. I think I'll go ahead and pursue it. I wound up getting an appointment to the Compton Police Department, and I was a rookie 3 days into the job when the Watts riot started, and Compton was immediately adjacent to Watts in Los Angeles. And my test of fire was
We're talking 68, 69?
65.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
August
All
of 1965. Us rookies are in the briefing room. The watch commander came in and said, "Look, we've got to have everybody out in the street. The city's blowing up. It's spreading south. It's coming into our city." And they paired me up with a senior officer. We hit the streets, and about 20 minutes into our first patrol, we got ambushed, and we were in a firefight, pinned down and everything else. And this is one of those life lessons, one of those points in my life that I'll always remember. And the lesson was one where we're pinned down and there were 4 or 5 people shooting at us, and we're hot and the adrenaline is pumping and the excitement. And I was on one side of the car behind the door. My partner was a few feet away on the other side, and he had cover of a dumpster, but he yelled back, "Get us some help right away." Well, even 3 days on the job, I did know 999, and that was officer desperately needs help. So I grabbed the microphone, I broadcast that, and this was my lesson that I learned because the dispatcher and everyone that heard it, there must have been 60, 70 people that heard that call on the net. And the dispatcher said, "What's your 1020?" Well, I didn't know where we were.
right. Yeah.
So I yelled back to my partner, and that was number one, the biggest mistake I made, because when I yelled back to him, "Where are we?" I inadvertently had the mic key pressed. So everybody heard me yell, "Where are we?" Then he went full bore Samuel Jackson Pulp Fiction style on me, chewed me out over the air. I mean, talked about
With bullets flying.
with bullets flying, talked about my heritage, my sexuality, my intelligence or lack thereof. He went off on me. So everybody heard that. Everybody did. Anyway, we ultimately wound up getting some help, got the situation under control. But at that point, anytime any of the guys, the officers that had heard that and that were with the PD at that time, the word became, as soon as they saw me, the first thing they asked me was, "Hey, Wansley, what's your 1020? To this day, guys, to this day, those of us that are still alive The first greeting any of them will say to me is, Wansley, what's your 1020?
Which in police talk, it's 1020 is location.
Location.
We know
Right.
that now.
Yeah, and cops are merciless, but we have fun with it. Yeah, we really do.
What a
So that's
trial
how I
by
did it.
3 days in, trial
3
by
days.
fire,
Right.
and firefight, quite frankly, in this case.
Exactly.
And
But
I
that's
hope
how
you
I got
came out of
into it.
it with no extra holes in you.
I came out of it, all things intact. So everything was good from that point on. But that really set my path on the law enforcement world.
Wow.
That could have turned some people off, but to your credit, Larry, you said, no, I handled this one okay, besides the little location part, but I want to stick with it. So good for you. So 1965 time frame, Compton PD. How many years did you, and you're out of the Marines. Where did you spend your time in the Marines, by the way? That was Vietnam era.
Okinawa and out at 29 Palms, out in the desert. But every weekend I was in LA at the beach. I was having a ball. You know, it was great. But I had a logistics MOS, and that was basically making sure that I had plans for everything, making sure that every piece of equipment, weapon, and everything else was where it was supposed to be. And so consequently, I had free time. It was one of those jobs where no one knew what you really did unless something really got screwed up. So my time in the Marine Corps was fantastic. And as I said before, the values that I learned and the training that I had served me very well. And at the PD, I went up the ranks pretty doggone quickly, and I became the Detective Bureau Commander. And Compton was a fun police department. It was action. It was all those things that you see on TV, movies, and everything else. And it was great. I really enjoyed it. And then the CIA and the FBI recruited me, and I was more intrigued with the agency piece of it until I found out what they wanted me to do. And that was to go to South Africa in a covert role as part of the anti-apartheid movement. Nelson Mandela was still in Robben Island. He was in prison. And I said, fellas, if I was single, I'm crazy enough that I would go do it, but I'm married, I have a new baby, so this is not for me. And concurrently, the Bureau was knocking and saying, hey, look, come on over here. And I did. And that's how it all got started. And the Bureau, ironically enough, when I joined the Bureau, almost my entire Bureau career was deep undercover.
When you're working undercover, was there a moment when you realized that the situation could turn deadly very quickly?
Many. The worst time was in East Texas, and I had actually transferred from LA. The big one was in LA. I was a high-flying, rich con man. I ran the Beverly Hills Hollywood jet set. A lot of the people that I dealt with were celebrities that happened to be crooks, but we got along and did business. But I was pretty much, after that long haul, I was pretty much burnt out, and I needed a break. So I went back to Quantico and I took an NA class through.
National Academy, police officer, 11 weeks training for police officers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Fitz, for
That's all right.
that. Anyway, I did that. I was actually on my way to language school, Arabic language school in Monterey, California. That was my next move. But then after that, I had the Cowboys offer that popped up. I went to the Dallas Cowboys. I accepted a job that I didn't know what it was. They couldn't tell me what it was. There was only one person that knew what the job was, and he was not around. But the interesting thing is how that came about. I met with a league rep who said the Cowboys are going to create a new position. I said, great. And they said, we're basically traveling the country looking for candidates, and you're one of those people that we're talking to. Super. Okay. What's the job? Well, we don't know. Well, what do you mean you don't know? You're looking for people. And they said, we really don't know, but it encompasses someone with your kind of background, with a law enforcement background, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. The next thing was to go to Tex Schramm's house. Tex Schramm was the president and general manager of the Cowboys. I met him on a Sunday afternoon. He met me at the door, sort of reminded me of Rodney Dangerfield in a way. He had a baggy Hawaiian shirt, Bermuda shorts on, and very, very friendly. He said, Hey, come on in. How about a drink? And of course, I'm bureau. I'm a 3-piece suit. And well, no, sir, not right now. He and I sat and we had an absolutely phenomenally delightful conversation. It was really great. It was like talking with you guys. And he kept offering me drinks, never talked about the job, my qualifications, or any of that kind of stuff. It was person to person. After about an hour or so, Coach Tom Landry showed up. Tom Landry showed up looking like a mortal man. My view of Tom Landry was always this impeccably dressed
The fedora.
man, fedora on the sideline and everything else. And he came in and sat down, and it was just like talking to my neighbor or what have you. We're having a conversation. He was cracking jokes, and I'm sitting there. And guys, I thought, I'm sitting here with two legends. One is just trying to get me drunk. The other is telling these, kind of corny jokes, but I'm having a great time. Well, after about another hour or so, Tex said that he and Tom had to appear at a function that night, so they would have to prepare and so forth. But he said, will you be at home about 7:00? I'll have a few minutes before I have to give a speech, and I'd like to give you a call. I said, sure. And I walked out of there, guys, slapping my head like, what happened? I had a good time. Went home. My wife asked,
Larry, can I back you up a little bit here? How many years in the bureau is this right now? And actually, what calendar year is it? Just to give us some perspective.
Yes, sir. That's 10 years. That's 1983.
Gotcha.
And I went home, and at 7:00, the phone rang, and I answered, and he said, Larry, this is Tex. Yes, sir, Mr. Schramm. No, none of that, Mr. Schramm, blah, 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 blah. I'm Tex. Yes, sir. Hey, I sure would like to have you on my team. How about it? And it shocked me. And I just instinctively said, well, great. He said, okay, great. Report to the office tomorrow morning. You'll be on our payroll. You're really going to like what we do for you and everything. We're going to take great care of you. But I've got to go give this speech now. But you be at the office tomorrow morning. You will be on our payroll. I don't care if it's 2 weeks you have to give the government or if it's 6 months. It doesn't matter. But you're going to be on our rolls tomorrow. You're really going to like it. Well, I got to go. Bye. And I'm standing there and I'm holding the phone like, okay, what just happened?
Yeah.
Which my wife asked me. And I told her. And guys, from that point on, there was fear and anxiety and tears in my house, but it shocked my family. Here we came from a very, very stable life in the FBI. And now here's the great unknown. Don't know what's going to happen. The next day, and so we didn't sleep much that night at all. There were a lot of tears. My wife, my kids didn't really know that much. But when I reported to the office the next day and they told me about, all the pay and benefits and everything else, that changed. Okay. But, and my team loyalty changed also because I was a Raiders and a Steelers fan before that. But the Cowboys position was one where I asked the guy that got all my paperwork done, well, what is my job? And he said, I don't know. Tex left town. He's going to be out for a week. When he comes back, you go just do whatever you need to do with the government. Take your time. When he comes back, then you ask him. Okay. That next week, I met with Tex Schramm, and this was a pivotal moment in history, not only my personal one, but also the NFL's, because I said, what is my job description? And he said, your job description is this. When the players are on the field, they're Tom Landry, the head coach's responsibility. As soon as they come off, they're yours. Your job is to make sure that there is nothing, mind or body, that interferes with their ability to be the best football player they can possibly be. That's your job description. Yes, sir. And I said, what kind of a budget do I have to do this? He said, budgets? Don't worry about the budget. He's, kid, I'm giving you a masterpiece. I'm giving you a blank canvas. You paint me a masterpiece. You need it, buy it. You create it. Nothing like this exists in the league at all right now. We are the first. So here's a blank canvas. Paint me a masterpiece. And I walked out of there. My head was spinning. But there was a challenge. There was an opportunity to do something that was meaningful. And one of the first things that I did back then, guys, there were in the early 80s, there were some major cocaine use problems in the NFL. major, and it was across the league. You may have recalled a movie called North Dallas 40. North Dallas 40 was Sesame Street compared to the way that really,
Oh boy.
and so consequently, I wound up going into a drug treatment center, drug rehab center in Minnesota. Now, the management, the administration had to approve me being there, as did the people in my group. These were patients, these were clients there. And I stayed with them 24/7 for 30 days, really learning what addiction is about. How does a person's life spiral once they start getting into the drugs and so forth and so on? It was one of the most profound lessons that I ever learned in my life. It really was. When I came back to Dallas after that, two former players, one was a guy named Thomas Hollywood Henderson, who contacted me, and another was a guy named D.D. Lewis. And well, he's passed on now, but independently reached out to me and they said, I want to help you help my brother players. Every way a player could screw up, I did it. And I want to help you help them. So here I am. And those guys were the cornerstones of my education about players and what their thoughts are and everything else. And from there, I was the director of counseling services. I was the player counselor. That was my position. And I started setting up programs, engaging with the players and everything else. The league was one where players could make a lot of money in a short period of time, but they really didn't prepare for life. And they had a lot of people that were basically taking from them. They were victims. And the average career is 3.5 years, period. And if it's not managed correctly or properly, when it's over, many guys found their careers over and they had absolutely nothing. So that was my mission, to do all of that. And basically, I essentially became a life coach. And that's what I did. The program was very, very successful at the Cowboys. The league picked it up and it set the standard. Every NFL team created a program like that. They created a team security program. There were no team security programs until the Cowboys said, hey, we're going to do something. So we started it 1983, and of course, it's across the league now. There are a lot of resources available, not only in the NFL, but other professional sports also. But it really, it raised the issue of athletes who have spent all of their time focused on their skill, their trade, and everything else, and not paying much attention to life. And what we wound up doing is providing that resource for life's experiences and everything else.
That's amazing, and it's what foresight Tex Schramm had in this regard to come up with this idea, and along with Landry, of course, Coach Landry. Yeah, and you were. I'm not sure I've ever heard quite a recruiting process like yours, sitting down and trying to get you drunk, not even talking about a job that doesn't exist yet, with no job title or description to it. But you're hired, and obviously they made an offer you couldn't refuse the next day, financially, benefit package, whatever. And now you basically you created the precedent for the rest of not just the NFL, it seems, but most major league sports, and I'm sure even other institutions out there where well, mostly sports where young men, maybe young women in some leagues can come into a lot of money quickly, and they don't always use their common sense. And it sounds like right away you surrounded yourself with some good people between Hollywood Henderson and the other former player at the time, I guess, and they knew how to communicate directly with these players because they had walked the walk, it sounds like, back in the day.
They
So
had.
good for you.
They had, and the players respected them because they had been there. Here's the voice of experience, not this guy from outside. I couldn't tell them anything, but having those former players really share with me what their experiences were, and with all that kind of information, it helped me shape the programs that I wanted to push forward. And the important thing, one of the more important things, was the fact that I had a boss that supported it. He said, no, we're going to go out there. We're going to lead the way. And we did. So I'm very, very proud of that opportunity that they provided and the support that they provided me.
You know, Larry, I don't know if you ever had the opportunity to interact with Butch Pachanico with the Eagles. You familiar with Butch?
Yes, I knew Butch very well.
Well, Butch was in major crimes with Philadelphia PD, and he took glory on the tour of the city, and Laurie hired him, kind of similar to you. He just hired him right off the bat while he was still a detective in major crimes. And I
Right.
remember working a case with a bunch of stolen automobiles, high-end automobiles that were replated. They were shipping out of the country, and they were giving some of these vehicles and selling them to some of the Philadelphia Eagles. And I remember going in and meeting Banner and meeting Laurie and meeting Ray Rhodes. But my question is, and I knew Butch. Butch and I were friends, but professional athletes, were they attractive targets for criminals and fraudsters? Did you find that to be true?
Absolutely. And in fact, let me share a story with you that came so upfront and true. When I was in the bureau, and I was in the organized crime, um, squad and so forth, and I worked all the related type stuff. Well, there were times when I would actually sit on Title III's, wiretaps, and our focus was on the mobsters and gambling and everything else. And there were times when I personally overheard calls during those wiretaps of Cowboys players, other players from around the league also, other teams, not just the Cowboys, but the transactions. And every one of those players were being duped. This guy is a friend, and hey, say hello to my friend. He's a real fan, et cetera, et cetera. And in Dallas, there was a particular restaurant that catered to, celebrities and the athletes. And so guys could always go there and take their friends, their group and everything else, have a really nice meal and drinks and everything else on the arm, so to speak. And so that was that kind of relationship. Well, my first team meeting, I'm looking out over the team, and all the players are in there, and there were 5 guys in there that I had actually overheard on the wiretaps.
Boy.
And I pulled them one by one, over a period of like 2 or 3 days. And I sat down with them and I said, number one, you know my background, you know where I come from. Number one, you're not in any trouble, but let me explain something to you. When you engaged in those kind of conversations, you're being a nice guy because you're having a free meal and guy's good to you and everything else. He said, this is my friend and he's a fan, and just say hello to him and everything else. When you would have those conversations, they were milking you for information. For the course of a weekend, information that you and guys like you provided. Well, this guy's hurt. We don't think he's going to play, or those kinds of things. Millions of dollars moved over the course of a weekend in terms of betting line.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it translated. You're not in any trouble. You were used. So we've got to do something about this situation, and we will. But you need to stop going to get the free meals and drinks and all that kind of thing. Yeah, but he was a nice guy. Of course he was. That was his MO. He befriends people. You feel comfortable with him and everything else. In the meantime, you're being used. That's all. Anyway, we got to a point where after I'd gone through all that, and I scared the guys to death, and I had to spend a lot of time telling them, no, you're not going to be arrested. You're fine, but you need to really think about who you associate with, what you talk about, and that kind of thing. And then I went and I had to sit down with the guy himself. And I said, look, I know all about you. Now with all the media attention, you learned about me. So number one, let's reach an understanding here. The FBI knows all about you, and I'm not carrying a badge or anything like that now. My focus is on the Dallas Cowboys, protection of the Dallas Cowboys, the brand, the players, everybody. So I need you to knock it off. We need to reach an understanding here that so far as my team, my players, and everything else, no more of that stuff. If we can reach that kind of agreement, we're good. But if we can't, I will shut you down. I will have your place on a blacklist. Every team that comes in here, every celebrity and everything else, they're going to know about you, and they will be penalized, especially NFL players. They'll be penalized if they come to your place. Well, he said, no, we're fine. It's good. We've had this conversation and we're fine. And he was very amiable. We had a good visit, and we reached that understanding and got up, shook hands, and he said, no, wait a minute, sit down. Let's have a meal. And I said, no, he said, got some really nice wine here. I said, no, thank you very much. But that's how all that came about. So in response to your question, yes, players were victimized in one way or another. Now, today, with the advent of social media and everything else, there's a great deal of situations where guys get set up, and all it takes is just a little snapshot. They are prime targets. Everybody's looking for a way to compromise, or at least allegedly compromise, a player and extort them to pony up some big bucks. There are some that actually do the deeds and have done the deeds and everything else, and they're paying the price for that and so forth. But there are a lot of situations where that happens, and that's just the nature of the league and the business and everything else. And people ask me, a lot of the media folks that I've known for years ask me, what's the difference, or is there a difference between the way that things were when you first started in the business and the way it is now? I said, some of the same stuff happens. The problem is, one of the issues is social media. It's out there like right now. And any person can make an allegation, and that allegation being on social media now becomes fact. The player has now, I mean, he's not given the benefit of the opportunity to clear his name or anything like that. The public perception of this guy is he did this, he, sexually violated this woman, or he did this heinous act. Again, there are times when guys, yes, they do some dumb things. No question about it. That's life. But by the same token, it's all exacerbated by the expediency of social media. It's like there right now.
The biggest difference that I've seen from the time when early on in our careers is the cameras on phones, and those things become a big issue. But real quick story, when I was stationed in Buffalo, New York, an individual that played at the same university I did, but after me, Andre Reed, we became friends. When I was in Buffalo, I had to do an interview with the Bills. And all the agents in the office knew, because he came to the office, went to the range with a couple other Bills. They knew we were friends. And I remember one of the guys from the organized crime squad coming over to me one day and saying, hey, I understand your buddy is going to sign some cards at a sports memorabilia shop. And I said, I don't know nothing about it. He says, well, tell him to get in and get out. And I says, what's going on? He says, it's a hot spot. Get in and get out. Don't talk to anybody. So I called Andre and I said, hey, Andre, I said, just a word of advice. When you go tonight, and he goes, look, I don't know nothing about this place, Ray. He said, my agent set it up. I said, look, don't talk to anybody. Don't take anything from anybody. Do what you got to do and get out. I said, it'll protect you. He says, no problem. And he never forgot that. He wound up giving me a football sign. Well, he gave it to my son. He came over to the house, football signed by him and Jim Kelly, which was pretty neat. 2 Hall of Famers.
Oh,
yeah, which
absolutely.
is really something.
Yeah.
So, but we always look out for some of those guys. And he's a friend. He's still a friend today.
Larry, we have a lot of women who listen to Cold Red. Thank you, women. Thank you, ladies. Did you have any involvement with the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders? Strictly professional, of course.
I was going to ask you to kind of qualify that question a bit.
Well, the ladies out there may want to know both sides of it, but we'll just ask you for one part of it for now.
Well, I sort of by default wound up having to really take care of the cheerleaders in the sense that every year they would have a swimsuit calendar photo shoot. For example, like the Sports Illustrated calendar. And so for 12 years, I would take a group of 28 to 30 young, beautiful women to some exotic place to do these photo shoots and everything. And when we would travel, and they always dressed to the nines and everything else. And I'll share a funny story with you in the airport. And this happened many, many times. I would have a lot of guys come up to me, and the message was simply, well, I understand that you're in charge of this group, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just want to volunteer my services. You don't have to pay me or anything like that. You need some help.
The altruistic men.
That's right. And my response would always be, I really do appreciate it and so forth, but no, I'm good. Got a really good operation plan and so forth. But the thing about it was one where I learned a lot, because these were, I could have been their grandfather. Okay. And the attitudes, the changing demographic was one where it helped me in terms of understanding what they thought about and what was really meaningful to them and that whole culture of these young women. I learned a lot from them. My job, and I had resources galore to take care of them and everything else, their safety in these foreign places. But I learned a lot about the young people that age, and what they held really valuable and what they didn't. It was a good educational period for me. It really was. And it helped me understand them and do everything I could to help them. So consequently, that was it. So yes, I did. There are a lot of times the photographers and we would have our conflicts because their perspective was for getting that shot, this exotic location and so forth and so on. My perspective was I want to keep them safe. So you as a photographer, you may want this particular location and you're looking at it from that standpoint. I'm looking at it from the standpoint that your risk level is much higher in this particular place. So I had the power and the authority to say, no, we're not going to do that. And initially, the first couple of years, they would really be upset with me because I would just shut it down and say, no, we'll find someplace else. But it was a very, very interesting process. And basically, just like the players, they were sort of all my sons, so to speak. With players, I had that father relationship with them. And the same thing with the young ladies. And quite frankly, the challenge was more with the young ladies than that.
What was the Cowboys were involved in multiple Super Bowls during your time there. That must have been, I was going to say, the Super Bowl of every year of your career. I mean, the biggest day, the biggest week or two prior to that, and I'm sure your antenna and everything about you and your team, your personal team that worked with you, not to mention the players, that had to be when you were on guard, perhaps more than anything, because you're in a different environment. I mean, you're not home in Dallas, you're somewhere else. Any interesting Super Bowl stories that you could share that our audience would appreciate, and protecting the names of the innocent, of course?
Well, actually, during my period, when I left the Cowboys, I went to American Airlines. So during that 3+ years where they were in the Super Bowl continually, I wasn't there. I was at American. When I went to American, my son took over my position. He has a Super Bowl ring. But anyway, no, my son, who grew up around the programs and everything else, and he's there as the director of player development now, and he's very, very good. I'm very proud of him.
Wow.
But when I went to American Airlines, that was a different world. It was an exciting world. It was one that I simply cannot express enough in terms of the challenge of what was going on, because everything that happened in the world really came through me, through my department. I had a staff of former law enforcement, FBI, DEA, federal, law enforcement people, immediate staff. And then I had policy and procedural oversight of another 3,000 security agents around the world. And actually, the airline experience was, and you can't compare the apples and oranges thing, so to speak, but it was more challenging because there were more weird situations, strange and challenging, dangerous situations that happened in the airline business that did not in the football business. Football was one where the issues and problems and everything else were virtually all the same. The only thing that changed from year to year to year would be names and faces of some of them, but consistently you always had those kinds of things in football. But with the airline business, I mean, hijacked airplanes, strikes, all of those kinds of things. And with respect to the airline business, I mean, this is the 25th year of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. I was there. I got that first call from our operations center that morning who said, Larry, we've got a missing airplane, Flight 11. Really? Talk to me. Tell me what's happening. And he said, we cannot raise it. I said, okay, well, as you gentlemen know, we've got procedures for everything. And I immediately called the FBI, and I was on the phone with the SAC, and that's the agent in charge of the Dallas division. And his name was Danny Deffenbaugh, a fine gentleman. He's passed on now. But I said, Danny, I've got a missing airplane. That's Flight 11. We can't race it. We have to presume that it's hijacked. Well, as you gentlemen know, there are TVs on in every building and room and everything else, keeping up with the news. And there was one that I was watching, and Danny had said, look, I'll have 8 or 10 agents that are headed to your office here in just a few minutes. While I was waiting, I'm looking at the TV, and there was a reporter standing in front of the North World Trade Center tower. And he was broadcasting, and he said there's a report of a small airplane that crashed into the tower, and the camera panned up, and it showed this plume of smoke. And I said, Danny, are you watching the news? And he said, yeah. He said, there's a plane crash or something. And I said, yeah, it's probably a private out of Teterboro or something like that. And we both kind of looked at it. And then I said, well, look, God bless them, but let's get back to my hijacking, my Flight 11. And as soon as I said that, we both watched United 175 plummet into the South Tower. And at that moment, Danny said to me, Larry, we're at war. And that changed everything. So what was happening in the airline business and everything else, well, compared to football, there was no comparison. Years before, I had made a proposal for a plan for airport airline screening and everything else. And the way we got to that point, I won't burden you with those details, but my boss at American Airlines, Bob Crandall, a legendary chairman in the industry, said, look, there's got to be a better way to do this because we contracted everything out. And you gentlemen remember the days when you could go to the airport and you could walk right up to the gate, escort, whomever was going to fly out, or you could meet someone. And all that morphed into a situation where the airlines ultimately became responsible for checkpoint screening at airports. And we contracted that out. Well, the performances were abysmal in the sense that the FAA was always testing us, trying to get threat items through and everything else, and they were successful. Well, they were successful, and when they did, that was a failure on the part of the airline, and all those violations came to me. So I had analysts that would take those and do all the preliminary stuff, but ultimately it came down to me, and I had to decide, do we write a check? It was $11,000 a pop at that time. Do we write a check? Do we try to fight it? It costs more money if you do that, or we try to mitigate it down to a much lesser amount. That's the way life was for all the airlines. And I wound up spending all of 1996 after the charge by my boss to find a better way, which I did. And I had a lot of help from really, really capable and knowledgeable people, politicians, people, you name it, but put it all together. And at the end of the year, I call it the Federal Security Screening Agency. How it's structured, how it operates, how it's funded, everything. And I gave it to my boss, and he said, good, tweak a couple of tweaks. But the next month he presented it to the industry, and it was very well received. But you gentlemen are familiar with bureaucracies. Obviously, It takes time. So from that point on, I tried to keep it alive and really moving along. And then along came 9/11. Chaos. Everybody was just absolutely destroyed at that time. And 2 days later, I got a call from the Secretary of Transportation's office who said, send the program, your proposal back, which I did. And 2 months later, it became the law of the land in the form of the TSA. And that's a hard experience in terms of how we got there, because in my humble opinion, didn't have to happen. After 9/11 incident, about a month later, I went up to New York to Ground Zero. And it was just one of the most horrific experiences I ever had in my life. I mean, the smell of death just it permeated the area. It just enshrouded you, so to speak. But there was one experience that I had as we kind of crawled through the rubble, and I was with several officials from the NYPD, the fire department, et cetera. And there was one lone gentleman off to the side, and he was transfixed. He was almost in a trance, and he was raking at the debris. And I asked one of the officials, well, why is no one helping that guy? He's all alone over there. Why doesn't he have some help? And they told me that's old, and they named him, and they said, he's a retired firefighter. Both of his sons are firefighters. They're in the rubble. He's looking for their bodies. I choked up then, because immediately I imagined myself being in his shoes. And I will always, to this day, remember how I felt at that time. It was one of the most horrific experiences I ever had.
Yeah, it was. It was. I remember like it was yesterday. It feels like it was yesterday. I'll never forget.
25 years ago in about
September.
5
Yeah.
months. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hard to believe in the world. Certainly has changed a lot since then. Larry, you had some connection with Whitney Houston. Can you walk us a little bit through how that all came into play in terms of being her security person for a while? Walk us through that.
Sure thing. I was really enjoying life at the Cowboys, and I received a call from her father, late 90, it was late 87. And he said, up to this point, she's been touring the U.S. and her security is her friend, has been her friends. They don't really know security, and we're going to be traveling internationally now and touring. And I've been asking around, I need a pro, and your name keeps popping up. So he offered me a job right there on the phone. We'd never met. I loved her music. Had never met her. And I turned him down. I said, look, I've got a great job. Thank you very much. I'm flattered, but I thank you. No, I can't do that. No, wait a minute. So he called back several times, and each time the numbers kept going up. I thought, well, he said, look, you're not playing football until late in the fall. Come up and talk to us. We can work something out. And I said, okay, I will, let me go talk to my boss. I went to Tex Schramm, the president and general manager of the Cowboys. And I said, this is what's happening. And Tex was a visionary. He truly was. And the world watches football, NFL football on TV because of Tex Schramm. Years and years ago, he was with CBS and he got the ball rolling. Anyway, he said, wait a minute. The NFL is going to start really focusing on the international market. They are going to they want to create an international league. So if I let you go do that, you have to promise me three things. Number one, the operation here, you can still run it from afar, wherever you are. I was okay. That's fine. I can reach out and I can get you wherever you are. Okay. Number three is that you promote the hell out of football because the NFL is going to go internationally. Bottom line is I met Whitney and her dad. We hit it off. We struck a deal. And during the tour, every place, every hotel that we check into, I would have 3 or 4 boxes of Cowboys swag, T-shirts, caps, photos, you name it. And there were always other artists that were in the house, so I'd get them all duded up and Cowboys gear and everything else. These were pre-cell phone and cell phone camera days and everything else and pre-internet. So consequently, you could not buy that kind of publicity. And Whitney, she wore a lot of Cowboys gear, caps, T-shirts, and so forth and so on. So it really was a very special time. She was I was very, very close to her and her family, but she was a different person than most people think of now when you look back historically. She was like a daughter. I treated her like a daughter to me because I had promised her dad, John Houston, I will take care of her just as I would my own daughter. And that was the standard I set. And when I came in and I set some professional standards that this is how we're going to operate. And I had some pushback at that time. I had some pushback when I told them this is what we're going to do. And they said, no, we'll tell you how it's going to go. And when I'm talking about Whitney and her assistant, mainly it was her assistant. Whitney just kind of shook her head and went along with it. And I said, look, thank you very much. I walked out. I went to my room at the hotel and I started packing my bag. Short time later, her dad showed up and he said, hey, what's going on? And I said, look, I just had this meeting to go over how things are going to. They told me what was going to happen. They weren't going to listen to me. They said, no, this is the way it's going to go. John, you're wasting your money and I'm wasting my time. So I'm out of here. And he said,
Larry, may I ask you, how old was Whitney at this point, approx?
He was 24.
Still a kid.
23, 24 years old.
Much like the players you're dealing with on the Cowboys.
Exactly.
You're kids at that age. Maybe they're a bit older back then than they are now at the same age. But, and obviously these are professionals. They're making big money. But yeah, you're dealing with someone. I'm not sure her agent was a man or a woman and what kind of relationship they had. But obviously that agent seemed to have some sway with her until you pushed back. And now let's hear the rest of that story.
Well, and that was her personal assistant.
personal assistant.
And so I said, look, guys, this is the way it's going to go. No, we'll tell you how it goes. And I said, well, look, I walked out. And as I said, I told John, you're wasting your money and I'm wasting my time because I'm a pro. I know my business. But if that's not going to be the case, there's no need in me being here. So I'm going back to Dallas. And he said, no, I'll take care of this, which he did. And he brought them over later on. And they both like two little kids. Well, we're sorry. We're going to do it your way and so forth. But she was never a problem. It was the people around her. I mean, a lot of the people, as you well know in your experiences, band, dancers, roadies, and everything else. And there was a lot of drug activity. She would never participated that I know of. I never saw any signals, anything in her behavior or anything like that that indicated that she did. I never saw her do anything. The only thing I saw her do was smoke a cigarette, which shocked me. And I said, why are you doing that? I mean, your voice, it'll ruin you. She said, well, hey, baby, I've got to do something here. And she smoked a cigarette, but I never, ever saw her engage in any illicit activity, drugs, or anything like that. But there are a lot of folks in that whole business that did. And so consequently, it was one of those things where she was isolated. I always made sure that she was, and I kept the bad stuff from her as much as I could. And, well, I did. I simply did. And they thought that I would be so enamored with that life because I was the guy that took care of everything. I, made things happen, whatever it was. Make it happen was just simply my mantra. Whatever the situation is, take care of it. And they kept me in enough money to do that, to make things simpler and easier as we crossed a border at 2:00 in the morning, and the border guards, yeah, hey, we can take care of this. So we did. That's how we operated. But during that time, there were 3 tours that were on the continent: George Michael and Michael Jackson, and then Whitney. So I knew every major drug dealer operation on the continent, and I did everything I could to keep it away from her. My focus was on her, and that's how it went. But they thought that I would really become so enamored with that life that I simply wouldn't go back to football. And I said, no, I told you day one that I'm going back to football. They promised my boss that I would be back to run training camp. And so I'm out of here. So our last show was in Monte Carlo. There was a private show for the royal family. And as usual, she did her typical knockout job. She was a fabulous entertainer. I mean, incredible talent. And the last opportunity that I had with her was the 1991 Super Bowl. And by then I'd gone back to football, and I was a league official with the World League, which was an NFL international league. All the NFL owners were the shareholders in the World League. And the 91 Super Bowl was in Tampa. So I went there as a league official. I did not know she was going to be there or performing. And once I got to the stadium, I learned that she was going to be singing the anthem. And I thought, well, this is great. I'll go by and pay a visit. So I went by her dressing room, and it was like old home week. I mean, it was really, we had a great time seeing everybody. It was a great reunion. And you may remember that this was at the beginning of the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, 1990. And so we had this really great reunion. And then she said, well, I've got to sing the national anthem. So just like old times, escort me down to the field.
Oh, boy.
And so her brother, myself, her father, and she had a security guy from the former LAPD with her. And we took her down to the field. And when we walked into the stadium, guys, the air was electric because our country was at war. We had just started the war, and we walked in, and people were all pumped up. Everybody was waving their little American flags and so forth. And when she got up there to sing the national anthem, and I was standing probably about 20 feet in front of her, looking up at her, and the color guard and technical people, TV, everybody was there. The orchestra was behind her. And when she started belting out that national anthem, people were choked up. It was one of those highly emotional moments. The air was electric. Everybody was pumped up. It really signified unity of everybody there, our country together. And when she belted out that last, that last home of the brave, and the flyover took place, everybody was out of their minds. I mean, it was incredible. when we were walking off the field, and I just looked at her and I said, "You killed it." And she said, "I know." That moment I will always, always remember. It really was very special.
Larry, if you had to pick one song that was your favorite that she sang, what would it be?
One Moment in Time, my all-time favorite. One Moment in Time, obviously the national anthem, but One Moment in Time was one where we were in London, which was our base, and it was a late night. There'd been a big party that she had attended and everything else, and we had right around 3 a.m. or something like that. A producer had told her, "Look, I've got a song for you, and why don't you meet me at the studio in the morning and let's knock it out. I want to run this by you." And okay, now it's 3 in the morning, like I say. Well, we showed up at the studio, and it was in Oxford Circus there in London, and there was a studio. We went there. He played the demo song. We listened to it. And I'm there thinking, the stamina of this woman. I mean, she's been going 24 hours practically. And she stepped into the booth, knocked it out. And that song, I mean, I was there and I was watching and listening, and I was just amazed at how she had it, the natural talent that she had. And she just knocked that song out, and it became a number one hit as a single. Everybody was demanding that. And it was the theme song for the 1988 Olympics, One Moment in Time.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That's my favorite song.
And you were there when she recorded it.
I was there, and I was just absolutely amazed because I was just a few feet from her. And of course, she's in the booth, and I'm thinking, wow, this is incredible.
Did that scene make it into the movie, which was all about you, the bodyguard?
No. Some of the things that I put in place and everything else that was incorporated into the movie and everything. But I will share with you the irony of it is, when she died, the suite that she died in at the Beverly Hilton Hotel was one of those that I used to do my undercover deals in regularly. And I was shocked when I learned that, and there was much later. And then to have her daughter die in the same way after that, it was just incredible. But I just sort of thought about life and how things go. Here I was with this great talent and everything else, and saw it just go down the tubes because of other influences. And it was one of those things that I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to be with her when things were really right. I saw and knew a different person. I really did. So I'll always remember that.
Just like the song, right?
Yes, One Moment in Time.
Right. I want to touch a little bit on your book, Tough Streets, Rough Skies, and Sunday Sidelines. What motivated you to write that book?
Actually, that goes back to Whitney Houston. And by that, what I mean is there were so many things happening at that time. And I was the center of all of it, the organization of it, the protection, the logistics, you name it. And at the end of the day, and normally at the end of the day, and that was somewhere between 3 and 5 a.m., I would sit after everything is in place, all the hatches are battened down, security's in place, and she's in, tucked in, and all that. And I'd go to my room and I'd take a hot shower, and I would have, for some strange reason, I cannot explain it, but I'd have a cup of tea and 2 Walker's shortbread cookies. And I'd sit down and I would recap the day, just little summaries of what the day had been like, what happened. That got me into the habit of doing that at the end of every day. So I began to, and that continues to this day. But I wound up having boxes and boxes and boxes of these chronologically order or set of notes, these binders all the way through what happened through my Whitney Houston career, through American Airlines, Cowboys again. I had my own security company for 17 years, and we catered to high network individuals and celebrities and all that kind of thing. And that kind of overlapped between the end of my American Airlines career and going back to the Cowboys. So I had a lot of, like I said, some very, very distinct clients, celebrities, and everything else. And I really got into that only because I was asked to do it. I really had no interest, but it was one of those things that, well, we need this and we need you to organize this and we need you to do this. So I did. So that overlapped with American Airlines and the Cowboys. But it was one of those things that all of that process was one where I kept all these journals, these notes. So consequently, for years and years and years, I had these boxes of these notes. And finally, and after I retired and went back to the Cowboys, and I had these 14 boxes, and we'd bought and sold a couple of houses and moved and all that. And frankly, my wife said, "Look, you've got to get rid of all this stuff. We're just paying extra money for holding all this stuff around every time we move. I'm going to call We Got Junk or something like that and just toss it." I said, "No, wait a minute. That's my life. That's going to be a book." And she said, "Well, you better get with it, pal." And so that's what it did. So the book is the compilation of all of those things that took place during those years. I'll qualify it, all those things that I can talk about. And so it's really one of those things that I'm proud of because, as I said, along the way, there were a lot of really great people, frankly, that made me look a whole lot better than I deserve. But I am about team working together and everything else. That's in my heart, my soul, and I've been around it all this time. Great. So I was always surrounded by great people, and it really pays homage to them. And then also my book is also dedicated to the memory of the 9/11 victims, all those who died in that catastrophic time, first responders, their families, and everything else. And there's a special dedication to my family because as an undercover guy, my life was crazy and my wife held it together. She basically raised the kids during those formative years because I wasn't around. And when I did go home, it was usually for a couple of days. And in order to go home, it was like a military operation because here, 40 miles away from where Larry Wansley lived, is Lawrence Keaton, Beverly Hills, Hollywood, hotshot, con man, you name it, dealing with celebrities and big moneyed people. But in order to do that, I would leave town. I'd go to Phoenix or St. Louis or someplace and then double back, fly into San Francisco. And I mean, it was a major operation just to be able to spend a couple of days at home. And when I did show up, I frightened my kids because I looked a whole lot different, had a lot of hair, wore a lot of gold and leather, you name it. And so during the times that I would be at home, and again, it was always just for 2 or 3 days because we couldn't go out, couldn't be seen with this family or anything like that. And it was a tough time. And my wife and I had a deal. We had an arrangement that when I did come home, I would leave the other guy outside. Well, as time moved on, and obviously based upon your experiences and knowledge about the business, those two personalities began to meld. They really did. And back then, we didn't have the cell phones, but we had pagers. And I had an answering service. The crooks would call and the answering service would notify me, well, I've got so-and-so on the line and everything else. And I tried to keep that separate, but it was more and more and more difficult because I was very, very good. I learned and I was very good at what I did. And it was one of those things where I couldn't keep those lines separately. So the hardship endured by my family and my wife holding it together. And there was one time when it absolutely crushed me because my son asked my wife, why didn't daddy love them anymore?
Well,
That crushed me. And so consequently, went through those really wild times. The undercover operations were extremely successful. And so consequently, I got to a point where I wanted to get away from it. I took an assignment at the FBI National Academy as a counselor to kind of reset and regroup. And then after that, actually, I was going to go to Monterey, California for Arabic language school. But in the meantime, that's when the Cowboys opportunity popped up and what have you. But a lot of things that took place that I'll cherish because of the people that supported me, that I worked with, that I learned from and everything else. And basically saved my life because there were those times when I thought I was a goner. And there was one incident out in East Texas where, as an undercover agent, I had become a business partner with this corrupt sheriff. That whole eastern sector of the state was corrupt, all the officials and so forth. The sheriff ran that operation out there. Nothing, no crook did business in that territory without paying off or a partnership with the sheriff. The sheriff knew my undercover persona as a front man for a mob group. And what I did was I went around the country and I'd set up illicit, illegal gambling casino operations. The story was I happened to stop off in Longview, Texas while I was driving over to Shreveport, Bossier City. To stop off there, check things out, get some sleep overnight. And the Bureau, the FBI, had been running that corruption investigation for almost about 5 years. So they had good informant information. They had good information, but they had gotten to a point where it reached, the point where, well, what next? And it was the perfect time to insert an undercover agent. Well, when I went to Dallas, it was to get away from that work, but I was there one day and it was so enticing. It was like, the thrill of the chase and everything else. And I was the ideal guy for that. So I got inserted into that environment. The sheriff and I became business partners, and it ultimately became a situation where he thought that I was doing a lot of business on the side and he wasn't getting his cut. He had his deputies pick me up one night at the club where I used to hang out. And they said he wants to talk to me. I said, okay, fine. I met with him many, many times, one-on-one, no wire, no surveillance and everything, because that community, I mean, everybody knew everybody and so forth. And we wound up in an oil field in Kilgore, Texas. It's about 1:00 in the morning. And he said, let's take a walk. Now we're walking across this oil field. And of course, there's a heavy smell of loamy soil and petroleum and everything else. And he said, the word around town is that you've got a lot of action going and I'm not getting my cut. He said, that's bad for my reputation. And about the time he said that, we stopped and there was a freshly dug pit, a grave nearby. And he pulled out his gun and he placed it against my head. And he said, that's bad for my reputation. Nobody crosses me. And in an instant, and this was a split-second process, I swear, I thought if I tell him, my mob people will come take him out if he whacks me. Well, that would only appeal to his sense of bravado. Let him come. I run this whole part of the state. If I tell him I'm really an FBI agent, well, he'll just bury me deeper. So I went nuts on him. I got in his face. I cursed him out. I called him every vile name I possibly could. I told him, you stupid so-and-so, you're going to shoot the goose that lays the golden eggs. You are a dumb blah, 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 blah. I mean, I just went nuts on him. And then he looked at me and he smiled and he said, I guess we don't have to have this conversation anymore. I said, no, we don't. He put his gun away and we started walking back to his car. And all along, I'm scared to death, okay? But all along, I keep reminding myself, just Wansley, be cool, just be cool. Got back to the car. They took me to my car. I went to my apartment. I walked in the door. I went over to the bar and I got a bottle of Jack Daniels and a water glass. No ice, no mix, no nothing. I filled the glass, chugged it down, and I passed out on the couch. But not long thereafter, there was a big raid because things were happening very, very quickly. And the Bureau decided we better take this operation down in a hurry. So they arrested like 21 officials, including the sheriff. But they were out to arrest all those folks. But I got a call that morning from my squad supervisor who said, get out of there right away because we're arresting all these people and he's going to come looking for you. They're going to come looking for you to arrest you to show what the upstanding citizens that, what a great job that they're doing. So don't pack anything, get in your car, get out of there right away, which I did. But ultimately the trial in Tyler was like the first coming of the OJ trial because people slept out on the sidewalk so that they would get a place in the courtroom because here, this guy, years and years and years, this whole criminal enterprise had run that part of the state. Everybody knew what was going on, but no one would ever buck them and so forth because they would disappear. They would simply disappear. And there were a lot of murders that he was responsible for or whatever. And so consequently, when I took the witness stand in it was very, very thick in there because it was the hottest thing in that part of the state. And the federal trial was in Tyler, Texas. And I hit the witness stand, and it became a mano a mano. He and I, he's staring at me, and that old statement about if looks could kill, he would have wiped me out. I mean, he was giving me looks like you wouldn't believe. And I did something that I would never thought that I would have done, but it became a personal thing between him and me. I'm staring at him, and my testimony is directly to him, to the extent that the judge halted the testimony. He said, Agent Wansley, you know better. You know better. And Mr. Welch, you will see the rest of the trial. If you don't stop it, you will see the rest of the trial from your jail cell on television. I will not have that in my courtroom. And the judge was right. I mean, I had gotten into this personal thing with him. So I switched gears, talked to the jury the way that I was supposed to and everything else. The jury was out just a short period of time. They convicted the first 5 defendants. That was the first wave. And that night, and it shocked everybody. The FBI had gotten this guy, and the crowning insult was it was a black FBI agent that did it. And so it was one of those things. I mean, it sent shockwaves through that whole section of the state. It was headline news and everything else. But the U.S. attorney, the prosecutor said, up to this point, we've been 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And he said, but you hit the long bomb when you hit the stand on this thing. And it changed everything. It changed the whole culture out there and everything else. So I'm really, really pleased at how things went. But I have to tell you that I was younger and I was dumber because I did a lot of things that in retrospect, when you look back on it, a lot of the chances that I took, I don't know. Well, I do know how I'm still here because God protected me. He put me where he wanted me at that particular time, and he guided me through everything. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be talking with you and being here, so to speak. But I've had some experiences that I cherish, and I cherish the people that I was involved with, the people that, as I said before, they were really professionals at their craft. They were great people, and it was a true privilege to work with them because they made me look better than I really deserve.
Larry, this has been great. You've been very generous with your time, and you just scratched the surface of your book, Tough Streets, Rough Skies, and Sunday Sidelines. Ray, why don't you final words, and then I'll take us out.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree that you had an angel with you. And that's how you survive. That's how we all survived in law enforcement. But I want to tell you one thing, that God is an Eagles fan, not a Cowboys fan, just so you know.
well, that's okay. Now, Big Dom and I have had that conversation a few times. So,
yeah, I'm sure.
And Butch. Absolutely.
And folks, if you're only listening and not watching, there's a big old Dallas Cowboy helmet right above Larry's head on a bookshelf behind him. So we know where his fandom lies. And also the paychecks didn't help back in the day either.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
But I'll tell you what, law enforcement and the FBI's loss when Larry left in the early 80s to go into the private sector certainly was the NFL's benefit, and later the airline industry, and everyone you've touched since then. You're very humble and very modest. I'm sure you did surround yourself with good people. That's the strongest attribute of a good leader. But certainly you knew how to choose them, and you knew how to get the most out of them. So it is really an impressive story, and I really appreciate, Larry, first of all, in your service to our country, certainly in the Marine Corps, and later in law enforcement and your private sector work. You're a very impressive guy. Again, thank you for sharing your time on in Cold Red. And I'll just give it to you. Any final words for you, Larry, before we take off here? Inspiration. Let me say, too, you had a person in high school that gave you some bad advice, and they're probably young people. I don't think it even has to do with race or gender or anything like that. They get advice from some people sometimes, and they say, all right, well, screw you. I'm going to prove you wrong. And in so many words, that's what you did. So any final words to our audience here in terms of your life journey and where you are now, but where you started?
Well, every interaction that I have with anyone, be it positive, hopefully they're mostly positive, or negative, it's an opportunity I look at as something I'll learn from. Every time I have that kind of interaction, I learn something from it that will help me become a better person in my dealings with others thereafter. So I've been blessed. I truly have been in so many ways. And as you said, I've been surrounded by great people. And now I'm talking to a couple that, even though one's an Eagles fan, but anyways,
Me too. Me
There's
too.
two.
We're
you
both
guys,
Philly
you-
guys. Yeah.
okay.
We,
But
we,
thanks to everyone. Just check out my website, larrywansley.com. But any way I can ever be of service, I'm around.
Well, thanks again, Larry, for donating your time to us tonight to talk about this, folk. Check out his books. You heard the website. I also want to give a shout out to our service people in harm's way right now. Speaking of wars that started in 91, you talked about, we obviously have something going on right now in the Middle East. So we know we have fans in the military and listeners. So we're thinking of you guys and gals over there too in the danger zone. So everyone, thanks again for listening to this episode of Cold Red. Like us, subscribe us, share us. Check out coldredpodcast.com. Thanks to our two producers, Matt Robinson and Matt McLaughlin, our music coordinator, Rick Schilling. And everyone, please, thanks again for listening. And please join us next time on Cold Red.